National remittances through Rapid Transfer, Western Union, RIA, Vigo, and UnityLink. To locate an EcoBank Express point, simply dial star 770 hash. Select 8 for Express Locator, select region, enter first 3 letters of your area, and begin to transact today. EcoBank is your CIMG marketing-oriented company of the year. EcoBank is your CIMG Hall of Fame bank, and EcoBank is the Pan-African Bank. Now, Telisol 4G is the fastest internet experience on 4G in the country. There's coverage in Accra, Tema, Ho, Koforidua, Takrady, and Bolgatanga. For the youth, there's Telisol Wave bundles designed to cater for your lifestyle, starting from as low as 2 cedis 50 pesos. That's 4G internet service to meet business, home, and on-the-go needs. This is 4G data not only on your phone and handheld devices, but also extended for use in offices and homes. There's also Telisol fiber broadband services for homes and offices at affordable rates with varied speeds, unlimited and bundled data options. If you live in Airport's residential area, Laboni, Rich, Cantonments, Jolu, and other locations, just call Telisol to find out about your area and service availability. The number is 0303 975 342 or 344. 0303 975 342 or 344. Send us an email on inquiry at telisol4g.com. Telisol, just a touch. Good morning, Commander. Please, I don't think PDS should stay. From the time they took over, I buy 50 Ghana cedis every week. They should rather let ECG manage their own thing for Papansa Teshinungwa Estates. Zero 0244340437 at Joy 997 FM is the Twitter handle. Joy 99.7 FM is the Facebook page. The hashtag is Joy SMS. Now, Adum Praise is 10 years old. Hooray! Celebrating 10 years of the Lord's goodness. This edition, we take you back to our humble beginnings. Adum Praise is on Friday, the 6th of September at Perez Dome, Jolu, with the finest assembly of praise leaders. Get ready to be part of this memorable experience. The 10th edition of Adum Praise is powered by Adum 106.3 FM and brought to you by Airtel Tigo Fuse. No expiry. Just dial star 567 hash to bundle now. Samson Ladi Ayenini is with us on the phone lines. Let's go to him now and get an understanding of where we are now on this PDS saga. Good morning, Samson. Thanks for joining us.
Morning, Daniel.
So yesterday you moderated the COSECA forum, and you have been looking very closely at this concessionaire agreement from the very beginning. Give us, in a nutshell, what we heard yesterday. Give us a summary of what we heard yesterday.
All right. So, COSECA, the coalition of stakeholders on electricity contracts and arrangements. The little about them is that this group came up in 2016, and I think they had earlier, showed up as coalition against the ECG concession. And then following what they explained to be discussions and negotiations during the time, decided not to be sort of against it, but to be a coalition that will assist the process in a manner that they thought was wiser and preserved the public, national interest. So eventually they became COSECA. And as they told us yesterday, they are now a registered entity, and it is chaired by, Dr. Steve Mateau. Kofi Bento from Imani is a member. Nanaya Jantua, formerly of the PRC, I'm sure we all will know her, is the executive secretary. And you have Mr. Kwame Jantua also in the energy sector, also being a member as well. There are a couple others on there, but these are the people I can remember readily from it. And also, of course, the convener,
Richard Nyama.
Right. So yesterday, their point was that after the various public engagements that they had done prior to the deal being completed in 2016 and those that they did in 2017, which eventually got them some attention, leading to government's decision, because at the time they believed that it was their intervention that led to government decision to improve the Ghanaian stakeholder from 20 to 51 minimum. Then the years of 25, reducing it rather to 20, they believe that these were successes that they had chalked at the time, because previously they didn't seem to have enough attention. They were not being given enough attention, but subsequently they felt they got some good attention, and then it ended up there. But yesterday they were saying that after everything else, they had gone thinking that, well, things would go on smoothly until the issues with PDS and government's announcement of the suspension came up. And after that, they decided to do their own checks again. And so what they presented yesterday, actually, they were doing something in phases. And the part one, they labeled the part one the PDS Fraud Saga, MIDA, IFC, and the missing link. And then part two, they spoke about the phase two. They have a phase one and phase two of the fraud, that there was some fraud. Even though you had the chairman explaining to us during the process that they would want to call them suspected fraud or irregularities and breaches, which government calls fundamental, rather than outright fraud, because they do not have the power to pronounce fraud. So they took us back a bit, but I don't know what use that is to us today. But they were trying to use taking us back to explain matters today. Number one, they pointed out that at the start, we know that MIDA is sort of the head body, the lead institution that is leading this whole process. And the consultants or the advisors were the IFC. Now, they pointed to us the fact that in September of 2016, they had discovered some wrongs. And on the basis of that, even before September, sometime in July, they discovered that. And what did they discover? They intercepted letters, duly authenticated, signed letters, which letters they verified. One was coming from the PURC, and one came from the Energy Commission, and they were all addressed to MIDA. So if you discover, their focus was on MIDA yesterday. Why were these letters addressed to MIDA? PURC complained that MIDA was circulating, that is in the request for proposal stage. MIDA was circulating tariff, tariff, as in determined tariff for the purposes of the contract. And PURC was unaware. Meanwhile, by the law, and they pointed to specific portions, PURC the power to determine the tariffs to be used for the transaction. And PURC was so unhappy, and the tone of the letter was very clear that they were unhappy about what had happened. So they said they demanded of MIDA to withdraw what they have circulated for the purposes of the transaction because they did not author it, and it was in bad taste because MIDA had usurped their power to do what they did not have power by law to do. Then Energy Commission, they also wrote, signed by its chief executive then acting, complaining to MIDA and telling MIDA that MIDA had distributed a power distribution methodology which they were unaware of. It was...
You mean the distribution and sale license document bearing the logo of the Energy Commission?
Exactly. Yes, I was hoping for the opportunity to be able to refer specifically. So it was the distribution and sale license document.
Yes.
That MIDA had circulated.
Yes, the methodology was in the case of the PURC.
Yes, that's the PURC methodology of
the tariff methodology. Yes.
Exactly. Thank you very much. So, Energy Commission wrote on the 6th of May 2016 and complained about what MIDA had done, MIDA and the IFC had done, and the IFC is the International Finance Corporation. And they said, quote, we wish to register our displeasure with this action of MIDA and IFC and also dissociate ourselves from the documents in circulation. We request of MIDA to take immediate steps to withdraw the said document in circulation and put measures in place to ensure this does not happen again in the future. Then, after they did this, these guys, and at the time, you know how we do things in this country, even though they had discovered this and this was authentic and they were pursuing the matter, they were labeled as MPP guys. At the time, it began with 3 of them. I think the name is Asante Eboa, Richard Nyama, and Saka Salia.
Yes.
I got to know later that almost except one of them, they are members of the COSECA.
Okay.
They were just labeled because we know them. They are MPP guys.
Yeah.
They have positions in the MPP and they communicate for the MPP. So they were just labeled as MPP guys who were out to do, some hatchet jobs, so to speak. Now, when they intercepted these documents, they demanded of the PURC and the Energy Commission to insist on their legal rights and get the MIDA and IFC to refrain from what they were doing. And they labeled what they were doing as fraud because MIDA said it did. Energy Commission said we did not author this. We also, Energy Commission actually said you put what you have done on our logo, our letterhead and logo, and what you are holding doesn't come from us. Where did you get the logo, our logo, to put on all of these? So the guy said this is pure fraud. So Energy Commission and PURC should put their foot down and insist on the right things.
And you represented them in courts to do this?
Eventually, I had to.
Okay.
Now, the unfortunate part is that when they went to court, by the time they went to court, the Energy Commission, the MIDA itself, had written to respond to the complaints by the two bodies and apologized for them and sort of said it had listened to their demand and complied with same. Then Energy Commission actually wrote to these guys, telling them, among others, and I'll just note one thing to you, and I'm holding that letter here, dated the 30th of August 2016. And it said, we refer to your letter dated 22nd August, blah, blah, and comes to say, please be informed that subsequent to our letter dated 6 May, 2016 to the Chief Executive Officer of MIDA concerning circulation of distribution and sale license documents. The following actions have been taken. So this letter was addressed to these guys who were complaining. And it said the following actions have been taken. 1, MIDA has ceased circulation of the document. And 2, the Commission has since issued draft distribution and sales license authored by the Commission. So now they are emphasizing this is authored by them, by the Commission, which will form part of the request for proposals package. Signed, Michael Opam, AG Executive Secretary of Energy Commission. So by the time they went to court, both the PURC and the Energy Commission had this representation. And this became matters for the court's attention. So more or less, the PURC and the Energy Commission, that these guys were complaining that MIDA and IFC had done something wrong against, had a representation suggesting that we had problems with MIDA and IFC.
Okay.
We have resolved our problems.
Okay.
The court said these people did not have the capacity to come to the court because the complaining parties, PURC and Energy Commission, have resolved their problems. So what are you guys doing here in the court? If they have any concerns, they are the ones supposed to be suing, not you. Even though these guys insisted that they came under Article 41F of the Constitution, which gives them the power as citizens of Ghana with a duty to protect, combat misuse of public property and corruption, and to preserve public property. So that case ended there because they were literally thrown out. The parties involved say we have resolved our matter. In fact, they sued the Attorney General, they sued MIDA, they sued PURC, and they sued Energy Commission in the hope that they were not doing their job. So the court will compel MIDA, PURC and Energy Commission to assert their rights and do the right thing. Now, when they discovered that things didn't seem to be going correctly, and here they were doing things that they didn't have any private benefit from, they said, okay, we won't waste any more money going to court. What we want to do is to file a petition to the U.S. government. So they filed a petition in September. And the petition was on the grounds of the U.S.'s own Act Against Foreign Corrupt Practices. They have a Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which is against their own citizens and companies who are doing businesses outside of their jurisdiction but engage in some unethical or wrongdoing. They are able to still call them to order and to punish them.
So, Samson, this is under the previous administration.
That is correct.
But the minority in parliament have filed a similar petition with the U.S. Embassy on the same Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, asking that there's currently fraud being perpetrated in the system.
Okay, so that's what a coincidence I should call it. I can't say beyond that, because this is what they had done long before, and now
yes,
these people have done the same
something
thing.
Like this is playing out again.
And you would imagine what these guys were labeled and called at the time they were filing these things. They were seen to be nation wreckers, doing the wrong things, and making the nation unpopular, and seeking to attract some sanctions, and for the country to lose the $500 million United States dollars for the improvement of the water sector. And always let's remember that the intervention is a part of a poverty reduction project. So they filed that one through the U.S. ambassador in Ghana, embassy in Ghana. They made copies to the Speaker of the Congress. They made copies to the Speaker of our Parliament, the minority leader, and to the Attorney General as well. But unfortunately, as we know, it doesn't appear nobody paid attention to their petitions. So they tried to recanvass all of these yesterday and to use that as the basis to begin asking questions and singling out MIDA and the IFC for where we are. And they said that from what they know so far, it does appear that when MIDA claims that it did a good job due diligence wise and other things. Now, before I forget, part of their problem with the IFC at the time was not only this alleged forged documents circulated and all of that, but it was also because they discovered that the IFC, which was superintending the process under MIDA, had parties who were interested in the contract, in the concession, who were associated with them. So conflict of interest of sorts. So they were raising all of these things and required that they be stopped from participating in the process. In fact, when they went to court, they asked the court that if the court granted all they wanted, the last thing they wanted the court to grant was to stop MIDA and IFC from further participating in the process going forward if they are found by the court to have, perpetrated the fraud that they alleged. And IFC was involved in that conflict of interest situation where it was doing the selection and all of these things, and yet entities that it had association with were also involved. Now, so they use this to say the acts of wrongdoing and alleged fraud started from the word go, and the blame must be put at the doorstep of MIDA and the IFC. Therefore, at this moment, MIDA and IFC, particularly MIDA, is the one that thinks action should be taken again. So they made these demands. Let me just read the 3 demands out. They, among others, suggested that PDS did not make the payments that the contract required it to make down payment of 100? Yes, I think about 100 million or so United States dollars to be put down. They suggest that this didn't happen, and that if there is a claim that $12.2 million was paid, the question to be asked is, at what period was this paid? If PDS was paying, from what account did it make that payment? Because their suspicion is that you handed the property to them, and how much does ECG is supposed to earn every day? By what period are they not able to raise that money and give to you when they should have put the money up front, and they didn't do so? So they asked the question: is the 12.2 million from Carl Bank from ECG's account, and therefore ECG's money, or it is from PDS? They just posed a question and said it is obvious to them that MIDA has not done its job. Then they ask, is there any bond from Downwell to PDS as the primary issuer? So all the insurance bond issue we have been talking about over the period, they want to know because they have their suspicions. And in fact, Richard was emphatic that you would find that this does not exist. So as far as he's concerned, it does look like plain, pure fraud, simple. Then the last one is, does PDS, Carl Bank, or Downwell Insurance have any letter or evidence to the contrary from our courts denying all the issues of forgery and fraud that have been raised? So if you ask me, I'll say this was the sort of the fulcrum of the the engagement they held yesterday. But the chairman, Dr. Steve Mantea, now said the original idea, as they sat in the meetings as COSECA and thought was agreed, was for AGI. I remember you asked the question there. Was for AGI to be the one to lead the process of getting the Ghanaian counterpart to take up the 51%. They feel it is not late, as Kofi Bento emphasized, that the process can be halted completely and allow for a transparent process of floating shares and allowing Ghanaians to own a part, rather than what appears to be a selective, secretive process in composing the entities that form the Ghanaian parties to hold the 51%, which subsequently there was an attempt to consolidate with a special purpose vehicle. So these are the questions that they put out.
So there seems to be a suspicion, Samson, that first of all, the private sector participation, the Ghanaians in there did not really raise any funds, but they were looking to accrue funds from the tariffs, that's from the electricity that they are selling, and then use that to raise the funds to pay off their premiums.
Pure and simple.
Yeah, but initially we know that in a Dunwell statement, some 7 million was paid before the concessionaire agreement was signed in the first place. So at that time, PDS had not officially taken the reins. I'm talking about them stating that 7 million was paid in February.
Right.
Yeah. So doesn't that contradict to an extent this position that has been taken by COSECA?
Okay, so I suspect that you point out correctly. We should put the questions to them. They should be answering these.
Beautiful, beautiful. There's also the points made yesterday by Dr. Mantiao that AGI may have found it difficult to form a consortium and raise the amount of money required, because we are talking about 51% of $580 million over 5 years that will be paid out. So I remember that point was made by Dr. Mantiao at that point, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he did.
Yeah. Something in your.
I think that's where you actually directed your question.
Yes. So in your experience in looking at what the climate of the Ghanaian business atmosphere is it that it has become difficult to find persons who are willing or able to raise equity like this to fund a business like this in Ghana?
They believe that, look, it's possible for Ghana to be able to get, as it were, the right process and put this on a footing that erases all these allegations, among others, by way of going through the original AGI process. For them, that's the bottom line.
Okay. But in any case, something legally speaking, we have also been introduced to some interesting elements of this, that even though the contract has been suspended, they find that government is willing to take liability for any losses that are incurred during this period. So if, for instance, this current arrangement that we have, money is lost by whoever is managing who brings power to our homes, government will take up that cost. Is that a bit problematic?
You see, there's something that prompted me to take my time and read all the documents as far as the contract is concerned. And this is what prompted me. We did a news file discussion, the first time we had a discussion on the subject matter. And Ejapa Mesa, who is MP and a communication member of the NPP, and also on the select committee in Parliament that, should have looked at these documents and did, suggested, among other things, conditions that became condition subsequent rather than condition precedent. And he pulled out the contract and pointed us to specific portions at the time. And on the show, you don't have the luxury to be able to do a better scrutiny of the process. So
Mm-hmm.
when we're done, I discovered that in studio they were still having a bit of argument here and there. So I procured a copy of the document and decided to read through all of it. And one thing that came out for me was it did not appear from the tenor of the contract that government, qua government, could make the intervention it had announced to Ghanaians that it had made. Because if you read certain portions of the contract, you will find, for example, where it speaks about commercial acts, sovereign immunity, among others.
Mm-hmm.
And it says, for example, that the execution, delivery, and performance, execution, delivery, and performance of the contract, and performance of the delivery performance by it or this agreement constitute private and commercial acts of Ghana rather than public or governmental acts. Okay, so I've got an invasion.
Yeah, I noticed there's a.
I decided to move in here to do this.
Very unfortunate. Sorry about that, something. It reminds me of that.
Okay, let me do that quickly. Let me do this quickly. Actually, I have to be in court, and because of this, I have to stay back and do this quickly before I take off.
Yes.
So
Uh-huh.
it says that the execution, delivery, and performance by it of this agreement constitute private and commercial acts of Ghana rather than public or governmental acts. Should any proceedings be brought against it or its assets in connection with this agreement, any of the transactions contemplated herein, no immunity sovereign. Here is the point. And again, there are portions of the contract, and you see every contract contains terms including when breaches occur, what should happen. If you read all the clauses, and they are very extensive clauses, I would say that from my view as a lawyer reading them, these contract processes, transaction processes, on the face of the document, watertight, so diligently crafted. Even if you get to the portions of force majeure, where you could see that they foresaw that things could happen, and PDS will say this is force majeure, and because of that, we are not liable to pay you anything or do something. They took their time. Often force majeure, you will see such an omnibus clause often running through. They took their time and went through the technical processes that I cannot even understand so well, and delineated each and every event that will occur that will constitute a force majeure, and proceeded further to provide for political force majeure. Force majeure in law is what we would normally say is an act of God.
Something you can't control.
Something you don't have a control over. So you see, they moved beyond that and provided for political force majeure.
Mm-hmm.
So that there are political acts that can be seen as things that are beyond their control. Political interventions that could lead them to suffer some loss for which they will be entitled to sufficient payment, if you like. Now, from the tenor of, for example, Article 10 of the agreement, you would find that there is the potential of huge financial loss that will be occasioned if PDS was found not to have done anything wrong after this sort of abrupt intervention, not to have done anything wrong, and that those actions of government affected their ability to perform the contract fully during the period of this suspension. Now, whatever it is the government does that affects the ability to perform the contract within the period, if it must not lead to them making a loss net after tax profit of 5%. So if, and this is easy to get to within this period, that you have suspended them and gone through all of these things with them, it's easy to get to because it's this only 5%. And once you cross that threshold of your intervention, which is not at their fault, leading to them making a loss, and that loss, after net after tax profit reaches 5% threshold, they are not liable for anything. They will use part of the monies that they will accrue to offset that loss you have made them to incur. So the point is this, that after I heard the Parmesa say all those things, then I said you need to read it. So after I read all the things, my question was, where in the contract does the step that has been taken allowed? Where in the contract is that step allowed? And if it is not allowed, they may say, oh, we have to act in an emergency. Point is, in the dispute resolution clauses of the contract, could they have used those clauses and still achieve what they were seeking? My answer to that is an emphatic yes. And the breach of that process, what can it occasion to Ghana? Potential judgment debt? My answer to that again is an emphatic yes. Except that so far, the people who may have to complain about what has happened to them, which have made them incur losses, which is the PDS, appear to be collaborating with those they may feel have offended them. That is, if they are found not to have done anything wrong. So, you may say that is what we call in law acquiescence. But you see, all they are doing now does not actually take away their right in subsequent time to assert a provision of the contract, which clearly has been breached in a fundamental respect by the government's intervention, which on the face of the contract may appear to be an intervention not warranted by law. So,
but this is a very unique case where you have assets of ECG, which are the only assets Ghana has to distribute power to the southern sector of the country. And those assets must be secured come hell or high water. There are no... the security of these assets is being called into question. Isn't that, a unique case enough?
You can do that using the same terms that you set out in the contract. They are so elaborate that you reading from one point to the next, you just find that what did we do? And see the purported suspension. For how long now? What exactly has happened? Look, if you don't go beyond the communications that have come forward from the government and the entities involved, you are right to actually to ask the question, is there really a suspension? And technically, you would find, in substance, there really is no suspension. Some may raise the question that, of course, they had the distribution license, they had the retail and sale license, and that it is one that has been suspended. Did the government actually communicate that it is one license that has been suspended? It is PDS completely suspended. That purported suspension, in fact, if you look through properly, you may come to the conclusion from the terms of the contract and the conduct of the parties so far that there is really no suspension. So that's what led me to read all of this and go through the pains of, perusing 248 pages.
Yeah, and I can see that. I can see that the summary that it comes down to really is that government has taken an action which in effect is no action at all, but could still end up costing us a lot of money.
You are right, and that's it. That's it. Your summary is perfect.
Samson Ladi, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
You're welcome.
Samson Ladi Ayenini is a private legal practitioner. He hosts Newsfile. And he has taken us through. So if you have followed this conversation from the very beginning, we started some 30 or so minutes ago. There are two things that have been established. Number one, these persons, COSECA, they have done the exact same thing that the minority in parliament is doing now. The difference is that when they did what they did in 2016, this current minority was in power. Okay, that aside, number two, the action that government has taken today could cost us adversely as Ghanaians if government does not find any fraud in what has actually happened. Number two, it actually is of no effect because it's still the same people who are managing the people that bring power to your home. So PDS or ECG, it's the name or the label doesn't really make a difference. So what is the effect of some of these actions that government takes, and who do we trust now? "15 minutes to the top of the hour." We want to pause this conversation at this point, even though this is something that is raging and will continue, and bring you our hotline documentary. Our hotline documentary this morning is Mind to Mind. And we are really having a very, very heartfelt conversation this morning about how we take care of the mentally challenged in the country. Mental health is not something that we take seriously enough as a country. If you look at the statistics of the number of people who suffer from mental health diseases in this country, we talk about suicide, we talk about depression, we talk about people who are weighed down emotionally and psychologically. I remember when we visited the Accra Psychiatric Hospital and the conditions that we saw, and finding out that these are people who just felt too sad to control their emotions sometimes. People who felt too angry to control their emotions sometimes. And sometimes we've all been there before. So we are all people who require that sort of assistance. So what are the facilities available for us? What we're going to do this morning is we're going to follow one woman who could be any one of us, find out what her experience is, find out what help she needs. So if it's you or someone you know, we know what to get for us. Stay with us. This is a Super Morning Show. We'll be right back.
In a world where everything is changing around you, sometimes you